Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Silver Tears Tarot, and a big welcome to our new people. So, we're going to be looking today at questions that kind of came in over the last couple of days, and particularly overnight. There were frustrated people who were saying, they've been getting some additional clarity on the situation. There are truths that have become more evident to them. So, why all the resistance? What's happening with that? What's happening with all their resistance? So, we'll take a look into that today. Of course, it'll be a general reading, as always. It's not going to resonate with everybody, and really shouldn't resonate with everybody. But if it does resonate with you, by all means, maybe check out some of the older messages or think about subscribing. So we're going to get started looking at the energetic backdrop for today. We've had, if you've been watching, there have been some pretty intense emotional and energetic backdrops coming through for us. And it's useful to do this because it gives us that context for the rest of the reading. When you get into the question around what's the resistance, it's helpful to know what kind of energy is happening in the day. Yeah, especially if it's anxiety energy. It's got that free-floating anxiety sort of feel to it. That almost anxiety for the sake of being anxious, not even necessarily whenever there's something wrong. This is a pervasive energy, though. It doesn't feel like I'm feeling it a little bit as it's happening. And I'm aware, and this is pretty much what it's describing with the Hanged Man coming out with the Nine of Swords. I'm aware of that anxiety, but that doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't still feel like anxiety. Here we have the Four of Wands. There's a tendency to prevail over the anxiety with the stability because of the awareness and the perspective that you have. And it's a perspective that maybe just a few short weeks ago, maybe you wouldn't have been able to say that. And with the type of awareness that your person is gaining, they're also in the same kind of place where they might be able to say, this is some anxiety that's happening to me. But it's almost like they're looking at it from the outside and they're able to regain that stability. So that's kind of what's in the energy for today. That's good news. That's good news because I feel like it's going to give us clearer, fewer ripples, clearer water through which to look at what is that resistance. It's difficult to get into the energy sometimes if it's too much, if there's too much going on. And lately here, there has been an awful lot going on. And just knowing which way that wind blows is helpful. And so it's good to know there's this new perspective that does seem to have come to you. It feels like it's more than just a new perspective. It's almost a mood that's starting to come over you. We have the Hanged Man come out in the reverse. This card come out in the reverse over and over the past few readings. And here lately we've been seeing it not just in these readings, but in the personal readings coming out in the upright. And so it feels like for a while it felt like there was some information that was kind of right around the corner. I still feel like this is dawning on you. It's like we saw the last time this card came out. I felt like it was in the process of dawning. I still feel like that's in the process. And the anxiety is still very real. Doesn't need to be specifically coming from one of you or the other. It's just kind of a pervasive feeling that's out there. Tendency to feel anxiety, but also with this perspective and ability to establish a little bit of stability. So you've got the Eight of Swords here in the reverse. This is that same kind of energy that's allowing you to establish that stability. This is having a good head on your shoulders. And this is energy that impacts both of you. It feels a little bit strong in your direction, but it impacts them too. So they are living, their best energetic life in that sense as well. And I would say it is actually pretty much it's a good thing. There's a sense of something coming to fruition, or it's more a realization that something does connect. It's something has gone well as a result of another action. So cause and effect. You guys got to see cause and effect work. you got to be able to write an if then kind of statement, you know, and it was something that you're pleased about. I get the sense this is not necessarily within the relationship. It's just something that's happening, like both of you doing well in your professional lives, that kind of energy. And not that it's the professional life. It could be something that's an internal improvement that's happening that makes you feel a little bit more whole. And it's a little bit of a reason to celebrate or to feel like you've gotten to a next level. It's by no means the end of all of the levels that you're trying to rise up, but there's an improvement here. So you guys have both gone through an improvement, not just healing, but an additional improvement. So you have the 10 of Wands and the 10 of Cups. We've been seeing this for a while. So the 10 of Wands is about the things that you needed to be able to set down. This is what's happened. You guys have gotten to some sort of crossroads, which we've also seen evidence of that crossroads. And you've gotten there and said, okay, so making a decision now going forward, I'm not going to continue to carry this thing as whatever this thing is, as a responsibility that I can't control. So both of you have lightened your load a little bit because you don't have control over something, which ultimately is going to be part of what frees things up for you. Now, there is an egoistic, and I don't mean egotistical, but an egoistic side of this as well, that it's how do I see myself, and does setting whatever part of this load down, delegating some task, or no longer being the person who does something, or it's something about that really changes how you see yourself, how they see themselves when you set down this part of the load, and you're put into a situation where it's a little bit of an emotional, now what do I do? Because you'll have said, okay, I realize I don't control this and I shouldn't be trying to see myself as the person who does control this. But you also get to a place where it's difficult because you can't decide how you want to resolve that sort of thing. And yet it's kind of, there's only one way to resolve something like that. You have to be able to see that truth. And so when you're doing that, you also have to be able to assimilate that truth. So we have the Moon card and we have the Three of Wands. It is something that is already happening. It's something that once you see it, it's a perspective change like we see up here. You're going to be, both of you, fine with getting back to a nice stable place emotionally. But you do have a bit of a bridge to cross, and yet you're already out there making that happen. You're, in fact, building the bridge. But there is some mystery about the situation, and mostly it's, I don't understand what to do next. I'm not sure what I should be doing next. The King of Cups was sitting on top over here. I feel like it was an honorable mention. It'll pop back out if it needs to, but what it felt like to me was there's emotion, that new emotional capacity has grown within your person. But I think what we haven't talked about was the new emotional capacity that has grown within you. It also, with there being some additional confidence and self-trust that we've seen building up in you, that's what makes this mystery not such a problem with knowing which way to go forward. You need a little bit less information as you're working through your solutions because of that road you've already traveled. It's the been there, done that sort of vibe. There's that King of Cups. Like I said, it will pop back out. Love when that happens, though. It'll pop back out if it needs to, because it was that limited emotion. There's a new capacity for emotion, and what I was going to tell you about that was there's a retraction. We've been watching this retraction in the energy. And really, it's been an increase in capacity overall, but the way that it shows up, your person has more emotion come into them. They kind of get flooded and then they retract. They go back into their shell. And then the next time they come out, though, they have a little bit more capacity. So they're actually growing their capacity. And so there's an acknowledgement of that. Even though there are limitations, even though they have a tendency to flood, and right now they seem to be retracted, or maybe starting to come out of retraction. But what we've noticed is they've still been fairly distant in the energy here recently. This doesn't necessarily talk about them being distant. It mostly just kind of says they're not currently, they're not, they're having some integrity about it. It feels like they're having some integrity about it. Maybe starting to get their wits about them and restore some of that emotional stability, even in light of this new perspective, which I'm going to go ahead and say causes as much anxiety as it resolves. There's that new truth. We're already starting to get the answer to the question that we're talking about today, but that new truth is hard to absorb into the way they see things. So when we ask the question why they're so resistant after seeing this truth, even as this additional clarity is coming out, partially it's because it takes some time to absorb that truth. So let's go ahead and ask that question, though. What else do we need to know about why it is so much resistance in this person? And then, of course, we'll ask about you. So we've got the Tower in the reverse, and the Tower in the reverse is not wanting to go through a change. It's the egoistic resistance, maybe, to be having to define themselves a little bit differently, like we saw over here. There's a fear, there's a feeling of not being able to maintain the pace. Also, with the Eight of Wands, there's this extreme push on some days to not just maintain the pace, but even up it a notch a little bit. And so there's a lot of, it really does kind of feel like this. So there is a resistance to change with the Tower here in reverse, a resistance to this tumultuous change that we already saw getting in the energy here. There's a draw, especially on some days. It's like they have some days where they're running away and some days where they're running toward. But they've got fear in between those two things with the Strength card in reverse. The Strength card in reverse is typically just, it's really just fear winning out over strength. And that's what we see there. So let's see what else wants to come out for this. So they're having a hard time assimilating the truths that we've been seeing them learning. They do still want to make things right. This is not just that new moon that we had a few days ago where there was that desire to make things right, but maybe things weren't nothing was in a big rush about it. There is a strong desire to make things right just in general and to find balance. And that is the Justice card. There's a matter of finding balance. But they have to figure out really what that's going to mean. There is a desire to figure it out. They've figured out something, but really it's that new perspective that they have, which honestly, it's this Hanged Man that we're about to talk about here. Similar to the one that we see over here. It's coming out in both decks, and it's about the new perspective that they have, and how it's changing their life. So the new perspective that they have is that they need to go on the quest, which seems like I feel like it seems very early. It seems like it's an early part of the process for them to become aware of. But they've come at this in a direction that's almost backwards. So they're aware that there is an issue. They've figured out some aspects of this issue, and it's like, well, I'm not happy. They figured out there's a problem. Then they look at it and they're like, why am I not, what's the problem? And the problem is that they're not happy. But they figure out that they're not happy because of the environment they live in. But now they're getting to a place where they realize they don't truly understand. That's what this perspective is about. They don't truly understand what it is that would make them happy. So it seems like they should know, but they don't. And they're very confused about this. So we've got the Eight of Cups here, which symbolizes the quest that they understand that they need to go on. So I feel like it was hard for me to say it as hard as it was for them to get to it. The Ace of Wands is the desire for that quest to be done and to be, they understand that it doesn't necessarily have to be an unpleasant thing, and they have some level of almost a curious, inspired energy about them as a result of it, but always with the shadow of what's happening in the situation with you, which has given them some of these new perspectives. And so it makes them, you know, they continue to be magnetized toward you. They continue to have that attraction, but they continue to do this thing where when they bring their energy closer to you and they come and they look for you, or they in some cases even get as far as reaching out, not just getting on your social media or watching, they'll figure out they don't exactly know what to do when they get there. Like they don't exactly know what to do when they get there. And so they have a tendency to run off again. But they're very attracted to come back. They're always like they don't go too far. Their energy has never, especially since about late April when we started noticing more people reaching out and getting in contact, you know, and still tons of people that haven't heard from anybody or haven't heard from their person, but the energy had come in a little bit closer and actually forced you to redefine um the way that you work through this because of their proximity of the energy. And so that made things kind of a whole new experience. And the thing is though, they keep with the same pattern. They keep coming up and then realizing, well, I don't know what to do once I'm this close. But then when they run away, they just want to be close again. So there's this back and forth sort of behavior, and sometimes it manifests in that cycle of narcissistic behavior. And you know, of course, not to diagnose anyone as a narcissist because that's not my job, but it's there's behavior that matches that cycle, you know. And a tendency to come back with the love bombing and then to become very emotionally distant. That's what this Knight of Wands is really kind of talking about. And yet we've got this Page of Wands in the upright over here that's like, hey, I'm curious. How do I solve this? And the thing is, that's a new perspective. That's a new energy for them. They haven't been looking to understand how to solve this in the same way. Their eyes opening has been somewhat useful. It's just a really slow process. I don't usually end up shuffling this long. I'm curious to know what else is going to come out here as we look at what is the resistance. So far, there's a lot of emotion kind of going back and forth. Had one will come up over here, a couple. We have the Five of Cups. It's the way they're looking at it sometimes. They've got the Five of Cups and the King of Wands, and these go together. I'm glad these came out together because the concepts really kind of are intertwined a little bit. So with the Five of Cups, there's a sense of them not being very satisfied with the way they've handled things with you so far. That's part of what keeps them resistant, and part of what they've solved. What they've solved is fantastic. What they haven't solved, though, is the interaction piece, what to do when they get to you. And so one of the things they've been doing is kind of working to really exhibit a lot of control, or exert a lot of control over themselves. And I would say exhibit's not necessarily the wrong word either. They want it to be known that they have that emotional control. That's another piece of the King of Cups too. Wants to be perceived as having that emotional self-control. And with the King of Wands, it's a matter of that I need to be able to control that emotion. And when they get closer to you, they realize it's not as easy to control, and they're not able to go with the flow. So it ends up being a situation where they bail and run away. We have the Magician. They're aware of how much of this sits in their own hands. But that when they think about it, this has almost got that Eight of Swords. So the Eight of Swords has already been used over here to talk about the energy of not getting all wrapped up in the details and up in their head. So the thing is, when they realize how much they really can impact their situation and which parts of it they can impact, when they realize that they've set some things down over here to enable them to turn to things they do have more control over, it shuts them down emotionally a little bit. And that's that fear again that comes out with the Strength card in the reverse. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start looking at you because I feel like I'm supposed to stop pulling cards about this. But, when we sum it up, basically they're resistant because of the fact that they're having a hard time with that very truth. That truth that you would say, why is it that hasn't facilitated them coming closer, is actually the thing keeping them away. The new perspective that they've gained is going to help give them some stability. And they're rocking back toward that stability, but there's a lot of resistance toward that, even resistance toward the change, even as they're being pushed toward the change. So there's a lot of pressure there. So I feel like when we get into the extended, we'll do an extended for this, because I feel like let's figure out what it is, or let's learn a little bit more about this behavior of the in and out, because I feel like the way that they come towards you with the love bombing and the disappearing act that immediately follows. Let's get in a little bit deeper and figure out kind of the why on that, because I think in a lot of cases that's what's causing you to ask the questions. When I think about the context in which it is asked, we'll look into that a little bit more, of that why with the in and out specifically as it relates to this. We'll also get deeper into you, because the real reason this collective is here is to solve the issue and to figure out what is, the best next step. So let's look at that. Let's take a look at the best next step, the place that you could be focused, lessons that you most want to be focused on. Okay, so this Ace of Cups comes out. Now this is about you feel and strongly reflect this closing up of the emotion that your person is doing. We've got the Seven of Cups in reverse and the Temperance in the upright, with an honorable mention that I'm just going to pull out because I'm not doing anything else with this deck, of the Queen of Pentacles. All right, so to get into this a little bit, the Ace of Cups is talking about that emotional closing off that your person is engaging over here. This is not so much them doing it intentionally, but it's the response they're having to the emotion of the situation. And it's really the emotion of realizing that they hold the key, that they hold the reins. So there's definitely a little bit of shutting down happening over there, which triggers you in a way and kind of shuts you down. So we've looked at various situations where something was going to trigger you, and this is one of them. However, with what you've already learned in your self-worth, which shows up here in the Queen of Pentacles, but with what you've already learned in your self-worth lessons, with what you've already done as far as developing your own self-trust and kind of that internal compass, the Temperance card is kind of reflecting the fact that you don't get blown off the tightrope so easily. This is not going to be a situation where you can't bounce back. And especially if you're watching this, or you otherwise suspect, because there will be people out there that never run across this channel, but they're going to have the same experience. And what's happening is they bounce back from what's happening in the energy, because this ends up being pervasive and echoes out through, it ripples out through the energy that surrounds the two of you. With the Seven of Cups here in the reverse, there's a realization that you have options, and that's kind of what's going to cause you to start correcting so that you don't fall off of the tightrope, I guess. I'm trying to figure out how to pull it all together, because the Seven of Cups in the reverse is going to be you realizing you have options, realizing that you don't necessarily need all the information about those options in order to make a good decision, and then going ahead and saying, oh, I'll just be fine with this, because even if I make a wrong decision, even if I do something that I later say, oh, I wish I had done something slightly different, I now have the self-worth to be able to say it's fine, and I'll be able to do the damage control. So use that carefully. Because don't use that as an excuse to do things that you just kind of feel like doing. Make sure that you can handle the consequences. But the thing is, with the changes that have been made here, there are a lot more consequences that you're capable of handling than maybe you were at the beginning of this. So you and your person were brought together in this soul recognition so that you could learn lessons. And we keep seeing again and again that even if you don't reunite with this person in any real way in the future, certainly not if you don't, come back together with them romantically, you still get the lessons. they've still been initiated. So it is both of your responsibilities to kind of work through these lessons. And so we look at what they are, and we look at what's happening with your person, and we realize that as you resolve these lessons, you become way more well equipped for one another. But then you have to look at what each of you still wants. So if they come back towards you, is that something you would still want? Which is absolutely the question you need to be asking. So you have the Nine of Cups here. The question your person all of a sudden now is becoming aware that they need to ask is this question, one that you have probably already been asking, and that's about what is it that truly makes me happy? And it's not just this person coming toward you or some element of your life going well, new job. It's kind of what is the big picture? What does it all coming together look like? What are, and don't even define all of the possibilities, just maybe talk about what it might look like so that it's an unlimited possibility as to how that might come in. There is so much energy of change around you right now that you can be taking on. And it's like, okay, so this energy that we saw kind of pervasive throughout the whole group, this 10 of Wands in reverse, where you've recently set something down, you've recently gotten to a crossroads and made the decision not to take something on as your responsibility, even if you then had to think of yourself differently. You have several more of these opportunities coming up. Choose wisely and don't be so tied to, this is the request or the recommendation as it's coming through. Choose wisely and don't be so tied to the person that you think you are, because there's a lot of change here and you could land in a place that you're still going to be able to really stand behind, because you'll be able to define why you are the way you are, partially because of these choices. There's a strong sense of victory ringing through this collective, but it's not the sort of victory that says the battle is over. So that's the one thing I would say about that. The Six of Wands is victory after a long battle, is often how I describe it. But it is, this is victory, but not necessarily at the end of a battle. It's like a victory along the way. Still a relative victory, and still an opportunity for, it's an opportunity for celebration, for recognition, and it may be the sort of recognition where you're recognizing a circumstance within yourself. A recognition that you start to see a little bit of what your person has seen in you all along, which is, that's a really nice thing. You've had a lot of really great energy showing up for you in some of these readings, even in light of some of the really challenging things that your person is going through. It doesn't necessarily mean, you know, these are difficult things. Like, you had to go through a lot of these things at some point too. Some of these are lessons that you have also had to learn, and you just are farther along on that. So when manifestation falls into your hands, do you freak out? Maybe the answer is sometimes. For them, the answer is kind of a lot. I mean, and so this is you saying, nope, I can manage this. And it's partially based on this energy that we're seeing here. So the Nine of Wands, part of the reason that you're able to manage this is because you have places where you used to be more resistant than you are now. You're not so resistant as you once were. You're learning some things. You're learning some things. So what else do we have here? We have the Queen of Wands. This is like about putting your effort where you're best going to be served. There's a beautiful energy of that. The one thing you do have to watch out for is you might feel like you're coming too far too fast at some point. Just keep in mind, you're not getting things that you don't deserve. People are hiring you for new things. You have to allow the abundance to come into your life, because it can sometimes be difficult to accept. Let me grab the card that fell. And it fell face down. So Queen of Swords, you do have some things that you're going to be cutting out of your life, but it doesn't seem like these desperate swipes. It feels like almost surgical, almost like saying, hey, there are some things I still want to accomplish, some lessons I still want to learn. I'm going to go ahead and enable that. I'm going to build a strategy. Here we have the Knight of Swords. I'm just like talking about what the cards are and not telling you what they are. We have the Page of Pentacles here in the reverse. That's the lesson that hasn't been learned. We have the King of Pentacles in reverse. That was not being sure that you are like ready for this. Did they hire me by mistake? They did not. So with the Queen of Swords, there's that feeling of, I'm going to go ahead and remove things out of my life to make way for these lessons that with the Page of Pentacles in reverse, maybe I haven't learned. The Knight of Swords is about decisive movement forward, and it's about using what you've learned. So the Swords energy is energy of intellect, and it even brings in a little bit of that energy of the King of Swords, where there's the feeling of building that strategy, and we see building a strategy based on what you know and what lessons you're still trying to learn. So this is almost like custom making your own lessons and using the elements in your life to do it. A lot of change is possible for you here. We are definitely digging into this because it's like you have something by the tail. We've seen this before. You have something by the tail, and now it's time to do that level of healing. And the thing is, it doesn't even seem like it. I think the worst of it is behind you. So we'll look into that when we get into the extended. We're also going to look into this person's in and out behavior. That's the thing that kind of popped out the most. Is here's the reason that we're asking the question, and let's go ahead and dig in deeper in that regard. So why are they so resistant? Even after seeing the truth? Well, it's because of the nature of the truth. They're trying to assimilate it into their worldview. But they've got this thing where they kind of freak out when they realize that they have the ability to impact their own future, which they realize over here. That's part of that new perspective, and it's shutting them down. We've seen the emotional retraction. And it causes them to do this kind of in and out sort of energy. So we'll look into that a little bit more when we get into the extended. So if you want to look into that, the link is going to be down below, and we can dive in somewhat deeper. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you again in tomorrow's reading.